Live from the booth at Pops, it's time for the Riverdale Review! What's up, Internet, and welcome back to another episode of the Riverdale Review. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie here, joined with my pals in podcasting, Mr. Kale Ward.
I tell you what, I don't like the way you raise your finger to get the waiter. That's really rude.
See, the problem with making visual jokes is that this is an audio-only podcast.
Hey, I'm trying to create an atmosphere, okay? You've got to go with it.
All right, and we've also got my man, Mr. Marco Cunalata.
I really thought you were going to say Mr. Marco Onimoto. I was like, all right, on brand.
Yeah, I did too.
I almost did, and then I was like, you know what? No, I'm not indulging this. Say hello, Marco.
No, that was my bit.
Hello, Marco.
See, I was setting him up for that, Kale, and he didn't do it.
He didn't do it.
I'm throwing him softballs.
It's hard to find good help these days.
Whoa.
I guess that's why you gotta wag your finger at him. I don't know.
I guess that's why I had to invite our guest here today, Mr. Mark Bouchard, joining us here in the booth today. Mark, say hello.
Very excited to be here, Pete, and I'm praying that my dog doesn't bark.
I mean, even if he does, it's okay. Now you guys know. Mark's
know.
dog's also joining us.
Yeah.
He's adorable.
I didn't know they let dogs in Pops.
I mean, look at him. He's such a precious little boy.
Yeah.
All right, you know what? We're just, plug your Instagram real quick so people can go look at him. He's adorable.
His Instagram is juicebox_is_small, but the internet way with an O. I need to find the password for the account, but there's I guess right now it's just a gallery of some cute, fluffy dogs.
So you guys go enjoy that. But for those who don't know, Mark, just tell people who you are, what you do, and where they can find you on the internet.
Well, I edit comics, I write comics, I write online a bit, and I'm at Mark Bouchard on Twitter and everything else.
Cool.
Shit, this dog is perfect. I found the Instagram.
He's a precious little boy.
Yes.
Anyway, so Mark, you are here not to talk about your dog, unfortunately, because look at him, he's so cute.
Just perfect.
But we are here to talk about Riverdale, as we do here on the Riverdale Review,
Yes.
which is, for what it's worth, the Pals Network's weekly Riverdale podcast, where each week we get together to talk about Riverdale. And, if you guys want to write into the show and have your thoughts about Riverdale around the air, you can hit us up at thecomicspals@gmail.com or follow our sister show, The Comics Pals, anywhere your social media is sold, and tell us your thoughts about the show to hear them read on the air. So, as we like to do, we kind of like to start the show off every week talking about our spoiler-free thoughts of the episode before we get into all the nitty-gritty. So, Mark, since you're our guest, why don't you start us off? What did you think about episode 19, chapter 19, Deathproof?
Well, I really liked it. I think that this season, obviously because of the Black Hood, the stakes, I feel are a bit higher than just like the small town murder mystery that happened before. I really like where we're going with the tension with Southside High, and I don't really want to give too much away, so I don't really know how much more detail I can go into.
Yeah, that's cool. So overall, what were your thoughts on this episode? Or did you thought this was another good one? Or
Yeah.
Any problems with it?
I watched episodes, I watched chapter 18 and chapter 19 back to back, and I think I liked this one a bit more, and I liked where we ended up. I felt like the cliffhanger was good, but I didn't feel like shorted by the amount of information we got. I left feeling satisfied, to be honest. I thought it was probably one of the best episodes of the season.
Nice. Yeah, I would agree. I think something I really liked about this episode was that, for the first time, I feel like all of the characters' storylines are kind of finally coming together towards one singular path. At least to some degree. I think a reoccurring theme has been like, we've been kind of breaking up the show by like each character's arc. Yeah. And that was kind of impossible this episode for me when I was putting the show notes together, because all the stories were finally kind of coming together and intertwining in ways that are like meaningful and interesting, not just like, rubbing up against each other because it's the same show.
Yeah, and I liked how everyone entered, at least there. I feel like the two main storylines kind of conversion we got. Everyone was a part of everyone's like dramatic crux of the episode.
Yeah, I would agree. And I definitely am a fan of where this episode leaves pretty much every character in the show. We got a lot of resolution to a lot of the stuff that's been building this arc, and it puts us in a really interesting place moving forward, I think. So, Kale, what did you think about the episode?
So, I have a lot of feelings about Betty, right? I like Betty a lot. Dark Betty is amazing. But let me tell you, Mechanic Betty, forget it.
Yeah, oh my god. I
can't.
I have a lot of feelings about Betty this episode, too.
I am 100% in love with Betty Cooper. Like, a girl that can work on cars, ooh, baby.
Does anyone feel as if that this episode coming out set the the delay on Veronica and Betty Vixens, or Betty and Veronica Vixens, to like come out next Wednesday, the new comic where it's just Betty and Veronica riding motorcycles? This episode set that up.
Interesting.
Perfect. With into it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that their branding is that well thought out, but it might just be a happy coincidence.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a happy coincidence, but I'm liking it.
Yeah. So, Marco, what do you think about it?
This episode was, I think probably like my favorite overall. If it wasn't last week's, it was like definitely this one. It was just like a lot happened. Like you said, a lot sort of gets resolved, which is nice to just like have everything come back home a little bit, and just see where the characters have gone and now are ending up. And then dude, Mechanic Betty, like that's the best Betty even in the comics. Like I'm for it. So all around thumbs up.
Yeah, I think the two real highlights for me this episode, like overall, were definitely that I think this was a continuation of the, kind of thing we talked about last episode where we kind of really finally got our first real Betty episode, where she's like really the anchor the entire time. And this kind of felt like a continuation of that. Like everybody else's stories definitely got a lot of, attention, I would say, to at least, varying degrees. But, I'm definitely really actively engaged with what's going on with Betty, which was definitely not the case earlier in the season. And I think my other high point here was that like we really finally got some more time with Cheryl again, for the first time in a while.
Especially after what happened.
Yeah, right, which was needed. And not just because of that, because it's like I feel like she's been lurking around this whole season and she's been used in a few episodes in similar ways to like Kevin, where it's just kind of like she's there to support one of the characters who has a storyline we're actually paying attention to. And now she's got her own stuff going on again for the first time in a while. And that's great because she's like just such a fun character,
Agreed. And I would like to talk about Cheryl because there's some stuff going on there that I am very conflicted about. So I'd like your opinions on it. So let's fucking get into it.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfect time to jump into the spoiler-full discussion. So if you guys haven't seen Chapter 19, Deathproof, now is your chance to jump out without having the episode spoiled for you. If you don't care about that kind of thing or you've already seen it, stick around for the entire thing. If not, we'll see you next week. So, we're gonna jump around a little bit here, but I feel like we're mostly gonna go in chronological order because of the nature of this episode. Like I said, is that we finally kind of had all these storylines converge to a certain degree. In a way that I feel like they really haven't since Mr. Andrews was shot. Like it's the first time that all these characters are really involved in the same events. Which is, it's great. It's great to see the gang back together,
Yeah.
But I want to start our conversation about, what picks up from where we left last episode, right? Like the cliffhanger is, Betty names Nick St. Clair and, she rushes off to, the hotel, I guess, that they're staying at, right? And she goes to warn Nick and his family. And just as basically, Sheriff Keller is arriving to take them into the station because of the allegations against Nick for what happened. So she gets a call from the mask. She's obviously surprised that he's not dead, right? Like she gave his name. She was expecting this blood on her hands. And the mask gives an answer that I found to be pretty interesting. And I want to unpack with you guys a little bit. So he said, Nick isn't...
It's not a mask, it's a hood.
Oh, I'm so sorry, I can't...
For some fucking reason.
I can't believe I called him the Black Mask. That's so funny. We made a joke about that shit last week. The Black Hood. So he says, Nick isn't one of Riverdale's sons, and you've already given me the most wonderful gift. When you said Nick's name in that moment of nakedness, you let me see the real Betty, and she was beautiful. Judge, jury, and executioner. Now that I've seen your true self, Betty, the real work can begin. So, something I find really interesting about the Hood, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about since we had our episode last week with Betty on, is the idea that we know that there is a fake Black Hood.
We think there's a fake Black Hood.
We think there's a fake Black Hood. We have reason to believe there's a fake Black Hood.
Yeah.
And the fact that this Hood keeps threatening to kill people, but hasn't since he started talking to Betty, especially this, when he's like, oh, he's not one of Riverdale's sons. It's like, so the fuck what? Like, you know, if your whole thing is your crusade against degenerates or whatever, it's like, he tried to rape and murder a girl. You were threatening Veronica, and she's not from Riverdale. Why does she count? Just because she's back in Riverdale and she's Hiram's daughter? Like, you know, I feel like there's, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, this excuse seemed flimsy to me.
Yeah, same with, like, Grundy. Like, she's not from Riverdale. She's a transient, like...
And now that you mention the sort of the flimsy excuse thing, I don't know if this is skipping too far, but they had it.
No, yeah, we're in full spoilers now. So at this point, if you want to say something from further ahead, that's okay.
All right. So when they the sheriff had experts test the letters, and one of the letters that Betty got, and the experts said they were made by different people.
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm getting at when I say, like, we feel like maybe there's an imposter here, right? So I feel like that totally makes sense. And, like, you know, not to skip ahead to the end, but when we see what the actions of the Hood at the end of the episode could have been informed by Betty's actions, not the phone calls. So it's interesting. I don't know. I'm wondering if this validates that, or if this is just part of his weird code and, like, he doesn't really give a shit about Nick St. Clair.
That's how I felt when I watched it.
I really wanted that guy to be dead.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that she was going to walk in on him and he was going to be strung up somehow, you know?
Yep.
Cool.
To keep the conversation around the Hood going, right? Like, Archie and Betty, later in the episode, they're walking to school together, and, you know, she starts to kind of lay the ground for what ends up being her plan this episode, right? Like, she says she's done playing his game. She says she's not going to answer his calls. You know, she's kind of starting to formulate that idea that maybe she's going to, stop submitting to this. But as they're, getting into that conversation, they catch Tony and Jug at Pops, which I want to kind of use to transition into this part of the conversation, right? So in the beginning of the episode, we see Tony spent the night at Jug's, which I think, exactly. We're kind of led to think that there's something that went on there, but it doesn't really seem like that's necessarily the case, right? Like, we learned that she's kind of couch surfing until her uncle stops locking her out of the house. Jughead, I think, tries to kind of make a romantic connection with her, and she, shuts him down. She says, it's like, we had a PG-13 grope session, and you're not over Betty. I'm not interested in being your... or anybody's rebound, and, I'm more into girls anyway.
Man, see, this is, that thing where we talked about last week where, people deal with things maturely, and it's like, no, I kind of wanted them, I wanted that drama. It's like, why do you guys have to be adults? Come on.
I kind of thought it was out of character for Jughead to have done anything.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's the character that I'm carrying, or, imprinting the characterization that I get from the comics, but even this Jughead, this is the Cole Sprouse Jug we get in the show, I just didn't think that some part of me wanted him to hold fast and hold out for Betty, probably because I knew what was going on. I wanted him to be more of an adult.
Okay.
I mean, I respect that, but I feel like with the scenario, when you really line up this series of events for him, it makes sense to me, that he would look for, comfort from someone else.
He doesn't really have anyone to go to at this point.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. When you look at what happens, right? He's going through this initiation that's pushing him away from, both Betty and Archie now. Tony's the closest person he has, and there's sexual tension between them, and, something happened. And, it sucks, but it's also he got dumped.
Yeah.
It's not like he cheated on Betty.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's, it's the kind of thing where, like, yeah, it would have been great if he was just like, no, I'm gonna, like, hold fast for her. But, like, even as someone who ships them real hard, like, I can't fault him for that.
No.
I can't tell, but I think there's a sailboat that's about to fall over. Yeah. Like, it looks like it's leaning super hard.
Kale, is that a metaphor for the current, like, atmosphere in Riverdale?
For the Bughead ship.
Yeah, right, exactly.
The ship might be tipping.
But anyway, so I think what my takeaway was from this is, like, I think that was meant to be kind of the wrap on their romantic tension. And I'm wondering how his relationship with her is going to progress forward now that they have actually hooked up. Because I wonder, is Betty going to just be a mature adult about it, like these characters seem to tend to be? Or is that going to be something that's played for drama, where his friendship with her is now a problem?
I think it'll be an episode cliffhanger, and then they'll talk about it the next episode. No big deal. Yeah,
I kind of think so too. Because one of the things I got an impression of this episode that I wanted to run by you guys, right, was later in the episode, right, when the whole thing happens at the school, which we'll talk about in a bit, like, Jughead calls Tony and Sweet Pea, like, his friends, you know? And I'm wondering if they're going to join, like, the gang, as it were. Like, if there's going to be events this season that push the broader cast together, as, like, that, division between the North and South is going to have to come to some kind of a conclusion. Yeah.
I think if the Ghoulies do exactly what Jughead said they would, then I think we will see that maybe in the second half of the season once the Hood stuff is over. But I think eventually the Serpents will have to get together with the Riverdale High kids and have a rainy night showdown with the Ghoulies, and someone will probably die.
Whoa.
Probably. I mean, the other thing I'm thinking is, like, I'm wondering if Tony's going to have a romance with one of the girls from the North. I know we talked earlier this season about thinking that there might be some kind of, and by talking about it, I mean, it was like Olivia's fan fiction. But,
I mean, listen, it's my fan fiction too. Let's get real.
No, but what I'm saying is, like, I feel like them dropping the thing of, like, well, I prefer girls anyway. It's like, okay, so she's going to date a woman at some point, and it would make sense if there's some Romeo and Juliet shit with her and one of the women from the North.
Cool subplot.
And, like, maybe that's part of the thing that brings their two groups together. Like, I could see some shit like that happening, you know?
One of the Pussycats, I bet.
Yeah.
Yes. I was just about to say we would get one of the Pussycats. I kind of want it to be... I'm blanking on her name. I kind of want it to be the one that Archie was dating.
Val?
Val, yes. Okay,
Val.
Cool. That's what I'd like it to be Val because I kind of want it to just be a thing that happens a little off screen or just at least out of the view of Archie because I want something to just be... I mean, based on who we know Val is, I don't think that she'd go out of the way to throw it in Archie's face, but I think if Archie saw her, he would feel with a serpent. I think that he would feel like as it was thrown in his face because if there's anything that this season has done, it has really cemented in me that I just don't like Archie. Like at all.
All right.
Yeah.
I want it to be that third Pussycat that we never get to see, that never has speaking roles or
line. Oh no, honey, you don't have one.
Yeah.
I'm the other one. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see, right? That's just my little fan theory for right now.
I mean, that line is either just like to appease the teens on the internet, or like it's gonna happen, and I think we'll find out sooner rather than later. I think it would be super satisfying to see Josie be that.
Yeah,
just because
I agree.
I
agree.
The mayor is that would be a huge, like, we all saw what happened when Mayor McCoy saw the when she found out that Josie had ingested the Jingle Jam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're actually going to talk about that in literally a minute here, but I think that's a really good point because one of the things that I've been thinking about since Olivia brought up her desire to see her get with Cheryl was I was like, she's never had any kind of romantic interaction with anybody on screen, and she's like this, super hot local famous musician. You'd think that she would have a boyfriend, right?
Cheryl?
No, not Cheryl. Josie.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, maybe Josie is gay. I could see that. I could totally see that. Because like,
who do you remember? Who she was dancing with at Nick's party?
I don't think it. I think it was with one of the
football players.
Oh, was it? Was it with one of the football players?
I see. That's why I'm asking. I don't remember. I
don't remember.
I don't really remember, but I don't feel like there was that many people there that weren't people that we know by name.
Yeah, it was like...
Yeah.
Because, like, Reggie was there, but Oh, no, she flirted with Reggie this episode. Never mind. Okay.
Was that flirting?
So, a little bit. I think so. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So
that could be our shitty male perspective.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I feel like there was one of those, like, CW, like, look away kind of deals, but... we'll talk about that when we get to the junkyard stuff. So to talk about some of the stuff that's going on with the parents this episode, right? Miss Blossom meets with the Lodges basically and blames her daughter for being sexually assaulted. So that was classy. Like, she wants to sweep it under the rug, and the girls are like there listening. So Cheryl hears this, right? She hears her mother say, "After all, nothing really happened to Cheryl." And, she's, like, obviously hurt and betrayed by this, but, she's used to her mother's abuse. And she doesn't want to appear weak in front of Veronica, so she kind of, like, sidesteps it. And there's a little bit more to this moment, but, like, what did you guys think about that moment?
So there was also that moment. Sorry, just bringing it, like, to another piece where it's, like, she's like, why don't you just, like, care more? And I was like, yeah, she's your mom. Why doesn't she care more? And it's like...
White people.
I wasn't good.
Just must be a white people thing, right, Marco?
White people thing. I don't know. I was like, yeah, like, it's her mom. Why doesn't she love her?
Because she's a monster.
But going back to it, it's like, yeah, it's pretty messed up that you would blame her for that. It's
yeah, right. She must have done something. It's like, are you fucking serious?
It's like, dude, I was literally like, hey, what's up? Oh, roofied. Like, I literally didn't do anything.
Yeah, that was like Miss Blossom just continually, like, time and time again, proves herself to be the parent of the year. Yeah, like, I just can't. It's kind of lost, or it gets lost because she's, like, now so presentable. But this, like, she had been recovering from burns. Like, Cheryl, like, burned her very badly.
Like her whole body.
Like,
right.
Yeah, the entire house.
She, like, definitely deserved it.
Yeah, no, 1,000%.
Oh, for sure.
1,000%. The Blossoms are like, and Cheryl is in my head to be more of a sympathetic character and like someone that I want to see more of and that I like enjoy now. Because of because like her parents are like so. It's like kind of when like see that like shithead in high school, and then like after your football game, you just see like one fumble, like dad is screaming in the parking lot at the kid. You're just like, I know how you are. I know why you are how you are. Okay, like yeah. And I think that it would be really cool to see, like, she obviously, as Pete was saying earlier.
Yeah, and I feel like we've seen a lot of personal growth for Cheryl since season 1.
Oh yeah, and as you were saying earlier, like, she really hasn't gotten a spotlight until this episode. She hasn't like appeared really alone in any scenes, and now we're like, I think next episode we'll get more of an arc or more of the beginning of an arc. I think that was sort of like the tease of a Cheryl arc that we'll get over the next couple episodes. Mostly focusing on her and her mom.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right, and we have a lot of Cheryl stuff to talk about throughout this episode, which is great. It's really been a treat, I think, this episode. Right after this reaction from Cheryl, Veronica kind of like stands up for her, right, and says like, she should not let Nick get away with this, and asked her to kind of take a stand because he's done this to other women. He tried to do it to her, and I thought it was really great that Cheryl kind of stood up for herself in that moment, where it's like she's like I'm not interested in like allowing you to use my trauma like for your crusade, right? And it's like, if I want to do this, I need to be ready to do it, not because you want me to do it and you won't tell your dad, right? It's like, did you tell your parents? No? Oh, okay, cool. But you didn't have a problem telling everybody about what he did to me. Yeah. And it's like, I didn't get that decision and you're making that decision, because Veronica doesn't want to be, the victim, I think. And I think like she doesn't see herself that way, right? And like, but she's fine using Cheryl for that means.
Definitely. And she was sort of like passing that off as not wanting anything to happen to Nick, which doesn't seem to be the case judging by how she acts whenever she's around him, because it's clear, like, there's, like, I wouldn't say revenge, I'd say, like, a justified punishment at this point.
Yeah, I mean, clearly this dude needs to get taken down, you know, for a number of reasons. Yeah. But, you know, while we're on the subject of what's going on with the parents, right, I think we teased a little bit earlier, right, like, Alice kind of calls this meeting of all the parents to, like, brag about how Betty didn't take drugs and judge everyone else's children.
Classic.
As Alice is wont to do.
The suburbs.
Yeah, I think my favorite part about this, like, this episode was the first time I had any moments where I really, like, appreciated Hiram on a major level, because, like, instead of just being, like, the evil shadow figure, like, he definitely, like, was a little catty, you know? Like, I loved how he was just like, excuse me, Alice, I'm not the only one who knows the story of that mugshot that your daughter published. And it's just like, oh, snap! Like...
I really want to get more of Alice, because there's no, like, I want to know what this extreme self-hatred comes from. Like, what, like, this is... At this point, like, it's kind of clear that this is like, as soon, like, why is she kicking the ladder down? So, like, she climbed up, why is she kicking the ladder down so hard?
Yeah, man, and I definitely think we're going to see more of that, you know, over this season, you know, for sure. I think that her past is definitely going to come into play somehow with the broader story that's going on here. But, you know, so basically the parents are kind of trying to get to the bottom of what happened, right? And Reggie admits that it was his jangle. You know, Veronica kind of tries to pin it on Nick, which, you know, doesn't really work out because he's not going to be able to be held accountable for this shit, obviously. They're not going to be able to get away with that line. You know, Mayor McCoy goes hard on Josie, you know, like we said, and basically is like, oh, I'm level-headed about this. Oh, you took drugs? What? I'm gonna raise the fucking South Side. Like, it's over.
Yeah.
That was a huge, like, what the fuck moment for me when she explodes into the school.
She just flips the fucking table.
Yeah.
Like...
Especially for, like, a mayor. And she's, like, I mean, we've kind of seen that there is, like, a slightly shady side to Mayor McCoy, but this kind of blew the, like, roof off that, and she is very clearly, like, projecting her personal life into her work, which I don't think is very good for an elected official. And she kind of solidifies the Serpent's response, and, like, that they are being persecuted, because they are. Oh. I wonder if this is ever going to get out some way. And, like, the Southside kids are ever going to find out about this. Because if they do, then they'll sort of have they'll have more of a justification to go against the Northsiders, and if we do see the Romeo and Juliet romance between Tony and a Northsider, I feel like that would be something that sort of cool the waters between the Northsiders and the Serpent.
Shit, I didn't even think about that. That also would, like, that would make Josie a great candidate for that as well, because of the whole thing with her mom.
And
oh, man.
And it wouldn't even be it wouldn't even, like, smooth everything over, though, but it would sort of just be, like, a de facto ceasefire as, like, Josie and Tony are.
Maybe. That would be cool.
Fanfiction established.
Yeah, right? That sounds like I mean, I would love if somebody would take one of these fan fiction stories that we pitch here and just, like, wrote something like that. I would love it.
like the CW writers.
Dude, they're listening to the show. I mean, all I know is that every time I post the show on YouTube, CW flags it. So they're obviously listening.
So they know.
That's yeah. Obviously.
Hey CW, I am available. I can email you a resume as soon as you're ready. So just
I too am looking for one.
All right, guys, save it for your LinkedIn profiles. So as we said, right, like, Mayor McCoy has this raid on Southside High, and Archie, you know, arrives to warn Jug about the raid, but basically as soon as he gets there, Mayor McCoy and the cops, like, come in like fucking stormtroopers and are, like, just, you know, picking people off, basically. And, Jug tries to save Tony, but Archie ends up, pulling him out and getting him out of there before he gets picked up too. And, basically afterwards, he takes him to Pops and, he learns that there is going to be a parlay between Tallboy and the leader of, the Ghoulies, which is, Malachi. That ends up kind of setting us up for the rest of the, Jughead Archie storyline this episode. But back at Riverdale High, Veronica is kind of telling Kevin about, her experiences with Nick, and, he pushes her to talk about it with his dad, to go tell her dad. She refuses because, like Mark said, she claims she doesn't want to have his blood on her hands, right? That she thinks her father's going to do something. And then, when Betty tries to approach her to apologize, Kevin calls her Benedict Betty, and they kind of just, give her the cold shoulder.
What a catty bitch.
I mean, I can't say that I don't get where he's coming from. I mean, she said some really mean shit to Veronica, and then her mom brought them all to her house to fucking shame them and make them do public service. So, I get it.
Look, I get it. Benedict Betty? Kevin, you're better than that.
You're better than that. Look, Betty's ponytail is iconic and beyond reproach.
And beyond reproach. This was a moment in my notes where Benedict Betty was, I said, come on. Maybe this friendship isn't as strong as we want it to be. And I said, maybe this is kind of where we'll start to see the Betty Veronica rivalry as opposed to the pure friendship like we see in the comics as opposed to what we've seen so far in the show.
Yeah, and I kind of got that vibe as well because, Veronica says, she's not worth it, right? She really gives her the cold shoulder and I was kind of thinking that we might be set up for something like that too. But, as we kind of see later on, that doesn't really seem to be the case too much. But I feel like getting that cold shoulder from the two of them is enough for her to answer the call that she gets immediately afterwards. Because literally just the last time that she was talking to Archie about everything, she said she wasn't going to play the game. She wasn't going to answer the phone anymore. And she does right away, right? She's just kind of answers... Yeah, right? And she's just why won't you just leave me alone? And it's obviously, what do you mean, why? Because he's a fucking serial killer, Betty.
Well, and because you keep picking up the phone.
Right, exactly. But, he basically tries to goad her into helping him. He says, if you're not going to help me, you're going to be responsible for Riverdale streets running red with blood. The same song and dance we've heard from, the supposed hood, how many times
from every
now.
other serial killer,
Yeah, it's just fucking basic, whatever. But he kind of introduces a new wrinkle in what's going on here, right? He tells Betty that she's going to be helping him go after the Sugar Man, who's apparently the drug maker, who's the one who is he calls him a corrupter of children. So Betty. Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, so when I first heard this, I heard Sugar Bandit, and there were several moments in this episode that I had to stop, pause, and rewind and go, "What?"
Dude, I feel like Sugar Bandit is a really good name for an indie band.
Yeah, you're right. TM, property of the Comics Pals. Fuck off.
Yep. I was gonna say, Mark, you're a punk kid. Do you approve? Right? I feel like that's Sugar Bandit. The Sugar Bandits.
No sense.
I don't know. I feel like that could be a really good name for a power pop band.
And if I'm in it, it's going to be a power pop band, so.
Cam on the Sugar Bandits.
There you go.
I don't hate that.
It's not the worst. But, so Betty, kind of points out how absurd his request is, right? She's like, I'm a school newspaper reporter. If you can't find him, what makes you think I can? And, he gives her the clue that she's friends with his former supplier's daughter, Cheryl. So that is kind of what gives us the in, here that connects Cheryl to the broader plot again, finally. Because, obviously, even though she wasn't in the main group the first time around, the mystery being about her brother gave her a kind of direct connection to everything. And I think this was kind of the first time we finally got a reason for her to be involved in the broader story, as well as having her own personal development.
I'm really conflicted about... Sorry, we're talking about Cheryl, right?
Yeah, this is going to take us into our Cheryl conversation.
Okay, thank God, because I quit listening. I'm really conflicted about Cheryl because while a lot happened to her in the last episode and throughout this episode, like on a deep and personal level, I get that. And what I'm about to say, the stuff that happened to her last episode bears no weight on that at all. Nick St. Clair's a piece of shit. I want it to be put it in stone. That was not Cheryl's fault. But what we know about Cheryl and just like the way her character is portrayed, almost everything that happened with her mom just felt 100% like manipulation to me.
Her manipulating her mother?
Yeah. It just like for me, like she didn't feel as like in charge as she came off, at the finale and then the premiere of this season. She just like it just seemed like she kind of reverted back to regular old teenager who happened to light her mom on fire,
Is that what regular teenagers do?
Well, I mean, coincidentally.
I don't think you're wrong. I feel like we see Cheryl sliding back in old habits. I think because I definitely believe the pain that she feels about the way that her mother treats her, and the abuse that she's clearly suffered from her mother. And I think I agree with you that there are times in this episode where I don't necessarily believe the angle that she's playing, but I do believe that the hurt is real, but she has learned to survive by manipulating people.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't have people she hasn't had people who genuinely cared about her, except for her brother, and he's been gone a long time. And I feel like, her whole relationship with her mother is focused around lies and power and fear, whether it's her abusing her or her burning her mother and their fucking house down and take the power back.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think that the I feel like the moment that she has with Veronica, right, where she hears her mother say that about her and the conversation they have where she cries are definitely both like the real Cheryl sticking out.
Yeah, agreed.
And the rest of the time it's her putting up a veneer, to not appear weak.
I feel like that conversation with Veronica is really where like the family air quotes dynamic with the Blossoms just really goes away. At this point, like, there are only two Blossoms. Or, no, I mean, if you count Betty's family, whatever. But at this point, there are only two people of the original Blossom family, and it's really anyone's game between Cheryl and her mother to grab power. So there's no familial, like, love between them, it seems, and there's really never been. But, I think that her use of, like, after her mother accepts money to not do anything about her assault, I feel like it's entirely justified, and I think that was kind of sort of the point where now I am more rooting for Cheryl than she's a character where I'm, like, initially in the first season, I was sort of rooting against her for a lot of it, but now this is kind of definitively the point where I'm like...
Yeah, I mean, she was an antagonist. But yeah, I definitely agree with you, Mark, that I think... she was absolutely kind of an antagonist in season 1. And now, I think she's definitely, by the end of season 1, she was kind of being put in the same team as the main kids. And I feel like we're kind of seeing that turn around again this season, where she's, gonna be back in their corner again, squarely. So, in trying to track down the Sugar Man, who the Black Hood has tasked her to find, right? Betty meets with her dear cousin, Cheryl. Which, as we like to do every episode that Cheryl's involved in, I have to call out, she's owning this fucking classic movie star, like, sunbathing look that she's got going on this season. Or not this season, this episode.
Dude, her looks are just fucking killer.
Dude, and those sunglasses, I was like, yo, those are fucking fresh.
Ooh.
Like, absolutely.
Girl, I'm jealous of Cheryl's wardrobe.
Dude, yeah, I gotta say. She's fucking looking good. But, so Betty goes there, right? She asks her how she's doing, and Cheryl, she had a great line, I thought. She says, "I'm compartmentalizing, but I can see right through you, invisible woman." So she's like, what are you here for, right? So Betty asks her about the Sugar Man, and we learn that, as a kid, she was told by her mother that her father was friends with the Sugar Man, who was, this kind of boogeyman-like figure that was going to, whisk them away to never be heard from again if they were bad, right? Or if they came out of their rooms while he was visiting. Betty kind of cuts to the chase, and she asks her, do you think this was someone involved in your father's drug business? And again, I thought Cheryl had a great line of like really calling someone out of kind of like,
yo, dude, what the fuck?
Yeah, right. Of like, I've really been through a lot, and it's like everybody is just using me. She says, "Dear God, Betty, is there no memory, however traumatic, that you won't defile?" And yeah, I honestly I feel for her because it's true. I feel like almost every character, their interactions with her are like so rooted in like, well, how can I use Cheryl? How can I use this relationship I have with her to get something out of her? If it's information, if it's, the cheerleaders, if it's whatever, power, everybody, or money, right? Her mother's selling her out. It really feels like she doesn't have anybody who's really genuinely in her corner. And I feel for her.
I think, these are all high school kids, so I feel like they're still stuck in the, Cheryl is the rich kid and we hate her. Kind of like that is just residually in their heads. Because, the amount of trauma that this girl has had to go through since this show has started is astronomical. Outweighs everything we've gotten so far. Her brother, dead at the hands of her father, who then kills himself after it has been revealed that he is a very, very large drug dealer. And her mother is terrible.
Yeah, and then, she got sexually assaulted and almost raped. And
yeah.
So.
And that's just this episode.
She's been through a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and speaking of trauma, right, later on in the episode, we find Cheryl, digging through old photos, and she finds this childhood drawing that has the Sugar Man in it, right? And, she's, clearly disturbed by this, and I think it really makes her think about what Betty asked her, and, she confronts her mother about it later, who she denies everything, as per usual, and says that, turns it around on Cheryl, right? She says, all of her father's records were seized by the police or destroyed in the fire that you caused. Again, I'll give it to you. She burned the house down, but way to turn around on your daughter again.
Yeah.
Yeah, for real.
What is it with white people and not loving their kids?
I don't know, dude.
You got a lot to learn, Marco.
I have stories I can tell you.
So let's keep going with the thread of the Sugar Man, right? So Betty, a little later on in the episode, tracks down Sheriff Keller at Pops, and she asks him about the Sugar Man, right? And he says that Blossom was the Sugar Man, that he was the one who was in charge. He went by a bunch of different names, right? But Betty kind of says, well, then where's the jingle jangle coming from? And he points out that it didn't hit the streets until he was dead. So that kind of puts a wrinkle in that whole theory, right? That connection doesn't really necessarily mean anything in that direct way anyway. And, that kind of, her, pulling her, fucking Nancy Drew stuff gives her an opportunity for a reuniting with Veronica. She's at Pops. She catches her trying to, catch Sheriff Keller. And it gives them an opportunity to kind of mend fences, She says, I didn't mean what I said, and there's no sane excuse, right? And Veronica's response, which I loved, was, no, B, there isn't. So tell me the insane excuse.
Yeah, that was a good line.
And that, gets her kind of caught up. She finally cuts Veronica in on everything that's been going on. I thought Veronica kind of summed it up pretty well, where she says, you're in a toxic relationship with the Black Hood, and you need to get out of it. So, basically, again, this is where we get the next little thread of Betty expressing that she has a plan to, figure out who the Sugar Man is and turn the tables on the Hood, and be the one who is taking the kind of power dynamic back in this weird relationship that she has with him. So she asks Veronica to help, and, that's kind of like the official reunition of B and V, I feel like, despite what I feel like Kayla and I were feeling earlier in the episode, it's kind of again, we see, okay, the characters, had a mature conversation about it and squashed their beef, so we're all good.
Yeah, I was, given their behavior earlier in the episode, I was really surprised that it went over as easily as it did.
And
yeah.
And to Betty's point last week, it was just a matter of, hey, like this is what's happened. Like you're my friend, and I can just I can tell you this. It's okay, and we can have that trust, and then this is where it's it's really shown.
Yeah, and I think it especially makes sense because and I'm sorry, just to clarify for the listener, when you said Betty's point last week, you mean Betty, our guest, Betty's last point last week.
Betty Fallon.
No, that's not your fault. I just want to make it. It's hard when you have guests who have the same name as characters on the show. But I think when she has her conversation with Archie earlier in the episode, right? We get kind of the explanation, I think, for why this is able to be the case is all the pieces are taken off the board for there to be a real threat to people she cares about, right? Polly's being hidden and, she's kind of cutting everyone in because she wants to turn it around on the hood. And I feel like that, that feels like the natural turning point here. That I think she kind of sees that she has a lot more cards to play with than I think she thought because the hood is trying to depend on her by manipulating her and she doesn't have to accept that power play. That's going to kind of transition us over to what's been going on with Jughead this episode. We kind of get our POV on that, right, with the announcement from a conversation with Ed and Fred. I meant to say Archie and Fred, Jesus. That the kids have to do community service, right? And he kind of asks about what's going on with Jughead because he knows he wasn't at the party. And I think, Fred kind of notices that there's been some distance there, and he compares Archie's efforts with Jughead to his own with FP, and he says it's a never-ending battle with those two. I just hope with Jug it's not a losing one. Again, that's kind of a great summation of what's been going on with Jughead this season, right? Is we've seen him being forced more and more into this role that he didn't want to be in, finding himself in increasingly dangerous and uncomfortable situations, It seems like some of that is maybe gonna start turning around, but in the same breath, I feel like it's, really only kind of a Band-Aid solution. And then it seems like there's a lot more trouble to come in that department.
Especially now. Especially after the drag race.
Yeah, right. Which, that's basically kind of where this starts off, right? Jug gets invited to this parlay by Tallboy, right? And he finds out Tallboy wants to kind of merge their two tribes, as it were, because of the increased, heat from the cops and because a bunch of people just got arrested, so they have less numbers. And he's looking for Jughead's endorsement, which obviously he's not going to give.
Well, and he's looking for Jughead's endorsement because the legacy there has weight, but where the fuck was that last episode? If that legacy has so much weight and you just want to walk up and give him a Serpent's jacket because he's FP's kid,
Oh yeah, I feel like that was because he kind of showed that he wasn't necessarily loyal. I feel like if when he first got the jacket, if he immediately started rolling with the Serpents, I don't know that he would have had to go through all of the stuff as much necessarily, or been as razzed. I mean, I'm sure he would have had to do initiations, right? But I feel like they had doubt that he was truly interested in being a serpent,
My question is, how old are there any ghoulies that aren't in high school? Because we haven't
Are there any serpents that aren't in high school?
Well, there's Tallboy and the
so one
unnamed.
We see other adults in the background.
Yeah, exactly. But we don't see any adult ghoulies in the background.
See, I don't know. I didn't necessarily get the impression that Malachi was in high school.
He looks, at the very least, he looks young. So, it seems like it's a young gang, and it's they are in control of, a fad drug, right? So, even with the cop seat, it feels weird to me. The Serpents are even, the getting in bed with the ghoulies is something even, on the Serpents' radar, considering that the background characters are all, these, chiseled, or, grizzled, sorry. I messed up my isms. Grizzled, old, dudes on motorbikes. And these ghoulies are just, punks in high school.
Ghoulies seem hyper violent.
Yeah.
They'll just fucking beat anybody up who's walking around the school late at night. It's,
right.
Even with FP in jail, it really seems like Tallboy would want to sort of steer away from that. In general.
I guess, but I also think, his point is salient where, the South Side is getting cracked down on, and, their numbers are weakened. They've lost their leader.
Yeah.
They definitely are in a weakened position. And, I don't know, I feel like the fact that FP FP seems to have respect for the ghoulies when they talk to him, and I think that definitely, to me, made me take them as a legitimate threat.
Yeah.
Basically, Tallboy kind of tries to strong-arm him into this, right? And like I said, when later on, Jug is talking to Archie back at his place, and, they come to the conclusion that they should go CFP. That they need to get, kind of like criminal, consultancy, I suppose, from the man himself. FP's obviously upset that Jug has joined the Serpents, but, he kind of gives them the advice, right, that, they have less people. They're outmanned, and, they need to avoid, fighting them outright because they can't match up. So he tries to tell them to, use their pride in their cars against them, challenges them to the drag race and all this stuff. And, whoever is going to win this is going to basically control the South Side. So, Marco, I wanted to get your thoughts on this scene specifically because I loved the way that, FP was shot through this. All the, close-ups of him just, with all this anguish and him, bathed in that light coming through the jail cell and everything. He just looked so, angelic, which I thought was really weird.
Yeah, that backlight on him and stuff. Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was a good scene. I think, I'm trying to remember. I really liked, so when they went to the cars, just skipping ahead a little bit, but, when they went to, the race, I was I jumped up, perked up. I was like, oh, snap, are they gonna do, a Fast and Furious kind of thing? What's going on? I want to see what they're doing. Yeah, it was a cool shot. I think that was what I was just building to. That's it. But I did think that, and Mark, I don't know if you've caught up to this in the comics, but I thought they were going for the most recent arc in Archie. So I was super pumped for what. Kale, have you read that most recent arc of Archie with the cars and stuff? I don't want to spoil anything.
I haven't, but I know what happens.
Okay, because
or I know the big part about it.
Okay, because that's where I thought they were heading. So I was super excited with where that whole thing was gonna go. But if not, no worries, it's fine. It's cool. Continue.
How much of it seems like there's a lot of little notes that are how, I mean, obviously they're talking, but how much do you think that the writers of either the comics or the show are talking with one another? Because at this point, there's been too many small notes since the Archie relaunch, kind of, where they were cool Archie, with the Mark Wade stuff.
Yeah.
How much of this do you think was planned? Because I don't think Riverdale was announced at the time when Mark Wade and Veronica Fish.
Fiona Staples started, and then and then Fish took over. Yeah.
So how? Yeah. So I've read it all. I've read it digitally, but how much do you? And I caught up to Riverdale. But how much do you think they were in talking? Because it seemed I haven't read the most recent arc, but to know that it has stuff to do with cars, and to know that recently, at least in the Riverdale comic, they went to New York prior to a New York friend of Veronica's coming back. So I mean, there's got to be some. Not collaboration. There's got to be at least email blast or something, or a newsletter.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's internal conversations going on there.
Yeah,
I don't think it's much
so.
though.
It's not.
Yeah.
I don't think it's much. I feel like it's synopses, a couple months before the general public gets the same synopses.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, because those production schedules are so wildly different that.
Yeah. And I think when you do look at the way that the comics are referenced in Riverdale, it's usually just very tangentially. It's the kind of thing of if you catch the nod, cool, but I don't feel like they're really using them synergistically in that way.
Yeah.
Do you know what my favorite nod of this episode was? Can you guess?
I can't. Hit me.
I didn't see any.
The
what
Beast.
was it?
Oh, the Beast.
Hot dog.
Yeah.
Oh, just Hot Dog being there, yeah.
And the fact that now he is Hot Dog the Third.
Yeah.
And isn't Jughead is Jughead Jones the Third?
Forsyth Pendleton the Third.
Yeah,
Forsyth.
Yeah, I love it. Give the weird guy a dog.
Yeah, no, they just have to make every punk kid in America identify with Jughead that much more. I get it. So from there, we kind of take it back to the main kids. They're doing their public service, right? Cleaning up the park. And we see Reggie kind of flirting with Josie. And debatably, maybe she's interested. The jury's out on that one. But, Veronica uses this as an opportunity to get the name of his dealer, right? And she heads to the south side. She makes a deal with this guy, and she says, my compliments to the sugar man. She kind of uses this to try to get a rise out of him. He runs off, and, Betty starts tailing him. And that cuts to, Jug and Arch challenging Malachi to that race that we talked about, right? So, this is where they all kind of finally line up together and have their Scooby-Doo moment, right? Of they get caught, they get pulled in, we realize that, it's all one and the same deal, basically. And that kind of throws the deal into, question. It gives Malachi a little bit of a better kind of bargaining position, I think. And he basically talks Jug into offering the White Worm and Sunnyside Trailer Park, their turf, to the Ghoulies if they lose, instead of the far more favorable terms that FP had suggested, and that does it, right? We get the challenge thrown down, and that takes us to what I'm sure was everyone's favorite part of the episode, which was the debut of Mechanic Betty.
Oh, baby. We do see her in the first season at some point when her dad is working on the car, and they do vaguely talk about it, but it's never really come up.
Yeah,
other
not
than
like
that.
this.
I think I wouldn't say it was my favorite point, but the most emotional high point for me was right after, sort of. Also, I don't want to do. I like Flag Girl Cheryl more than Mechanic Betty, but that's just me.
Okay.
But there was just such a command. She just brings a command to every scene. She literally just steps over someone who has been doing this for years, and Tony was just okay.
Yeah.
And then the sunglasses come on.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, Cheryl definitely steals every scene that she's a part of. That's for sure.
My high point after that was in the midst of the race when Archie grabs the wheel.
We got a little bit before that for sure.
Very slowly. Go on. Do what you're gonna do.
No. Yeah. No. You're good. But so we kind of finally get the conversation between her and Jug, right? They talk for the first time since they broke up. And she's working on the car that he's going to be driving, which is Reggie's for some reason. I guess, right? Yeah, you can just drag race using my car. It's fine. No big deal. I'm a drug dealer. I can afford another one. But so they kind of air their dirty laundry, right? She calls him out on lying about joining the Serpents, and he calls her out on her dumping him through Archie, which was obviously not going to go well. But, she kind of tries to half explain what's going on to him. And, she basically just leaves it at right now, I want to just get you through this race, right? She promises she's going to make it up to him. And, we'll talk about that a little bit in the fallout from this race. So the last kind of thing that happens before this big race, right, is Cheryl's kind of confrontation with her attacker. Right, she runs into Nick at the at Pops, and he just cements fuckboy status for me here. Obviously he was already one, but oh my god, could they make this character any more insufferable?
Fuck this guy.
He calls her the wrong name. He asks her how she is. And she has this very sincere reaction. She's like, how am I, right? It's you roofied me, you tried to rape me. And he just is fucking sociopathic about this shit, man. He's like, well, I don't think that's what happened. It's you're a desperate tart from a truck stop town. And fucking, he says, let's not distort reality to cover your morning after shame. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? You drugged her and got fucking stomped by a girl band.
Yeah, that was when I wrote down, man, I wish they killed him. God, I wish the hood destroyed him.
Please. I wish. But this is where Cheryl figures out, right, that like her mother sold her out, you know, because she's like, call your lawyer, like, you're being so horrible about this. I want to see you get like pay for it. And he's basically like, oh, we already did pay for it, you know, and you're not going to say anything. There's a reason they call it hush money, you know, and just doesn't give a fuck, man. Does not give a fuck. And, you know, that leads to kind of the final confrontation with Cheryl and her mother for this episode that like kind of like finally gets all the pieces of the puzzle together for the Sugar Man, right? You know, like she calls out her mother. And, you know, she passes the blame on to the lodge, and she's like, oh, well, they're accepting their money. And, she, you know, she says, like, I don't care about them. I care about my mother. You know, it's like, you protect my father who murdered your son, but you won't even stand up for me against my would-be rapist. And, you know, she continues to show an insane lack of empathy for her daughter, you know? Like, she says, oh, don't be absurd, Cheryl. So what do you mean? That's exactly what's happening. She's totally calling you out on your shit right here.
I hate her so much.
She's a monster. I'm so floored by it, you know, like just her whole attitude about this, and like there's no other angle. It's just she's just cold and unfeeling, like, you know,
like a reptilian.
The rich people are all the ruling class are lizard people. I'm getting it out here right now.
I mean,
it's
it
in
makes
the
sense.
Government, it's in industry. We need to fight back.
Join the Riverdale Resistance.
The Red Circle
There you go.
takes a definitive stance against the lizard people. Archie's Weird Mysteries crossover. CW, you're listening? Take it. That one's free.
You can also reach me on Twitter at Mark Bouchard.
It's Mark Bouchard. You gotta put the first letters.
Oh, right. Excuse me. But yeah, you know, so she does the only thing she can do to really like get what she needs from her mother, which is to leverage money against her, right? You know, she says like, it's, you know, it's plain and simple. Like, they bought your silence, but I'm taking the check until you give me what I want, because like, that's obviously all you care about, right? Is the money, not me. And, you know, it's hard to see that any differently, I think, you know? So, you know, then we get the big race, right? You know, it's like right beforehand, Archie and Veronica kind of like have their last conversation about it. We learn about, you know, that Archie has a plan going into it, which, you know, we'll talk about a little bit later. But this is where Veronica gets that call from Cheryl, figures out that her parents have taken that money, and confronts them about it, right? And she finally admits what Nick tried to do to her. So what did you guys think about this?
About what specifically?
About the fact that she like finally has the breakthrough here, right? Like the fact that like she finds out that her parents are taking this money, and that's kind of the thing that finally gets her to stand up and admit what's going on here, right? And to, you know, you said that you didn't feel like she really cared about having Nick's blood on her hands. And, you know, like, this is kind of the thing that pushes her over the edge. And why do you guys think that was? Was it specifically the idea of, like, her parents taking the money from them, and that, like, why do you think she finally felt like she had the skin in the game?
I think it's because her friend was hurt and was a legitimate victim. And
you think so?
And the lodge's taking that money was sort of undermining probably what little hope she had that they were good people. You know,
yeah, I can see that.
Like I think she was hoping that they would react better to Cheryl's victimization than they would to hers, and she may have been like testing the waters there. Yeah.
I think I part of me feels like she wasn't going to tell them.
Yeah.
Until her father starts to say that he thinks maybe it didn't happen. Yeah. You know, like he's like, well, you know, we don't know, and we need the money, and you know, and that's when she really finally pulls the card.
Yeah.
So I thought what happens next is kind of interesting there, right? Like Hiram, I think, you know, he gets real fired up about it, you know, right? And he's ready to, I think, kind of threaten something before Hermione just steps in and she's like, oh, we're not going to take any of their money.
Yeah. Yep.
Man, I love to see the moments where I feel like we see the real Hiram come out.
Yeah, he's an ice cold villain, and it's really cool to see that paired with what we know of Veronica and her past, and then sort of what we see at the end of the episode as well.
Yeah, which is going to have some pretty interesting implications, I think. But that takes us to the big race, So we get another classic Kevin one-liner, I think, much better than his dig at Betty earlier, which was not the kind of drag race I saw myself going to, but at least the guys are hot.
Yeah, that was good.
I fucking audibly laughed out loud at that one. I was like, that's fucking classic.
I went, Kevin, come on. Kevin.
Oh no, dude, I got such a kick out of that one. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I started Snap.
That to me definitely felt like a joke that Jeremy would have made when we were in college.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
I think that jokes like that, because the way the show is done, it really draws on the 1950s kind of vibe that Archie has. But then they just I feel like it's like the anecdotal stuff and the one-liners. They're just shake you awake, and you're like, it's 2017. We're here. This is what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how they kind of it feels like the town is haunted by the spirit of Archie more so than it does. There's all these things that are very 1950s, but it's the remnants of those things.
They got possessed by grease.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
That was poetic.
I get one of those maybe at least once an episode.
Timestamp that one.
So as much as I loved Mechanic Betty, this was this was my favorite Betty look, you guys. Race Betty, so cute. And I don't get me wrong, I love Race Cheryl, but Race Betty with the fucking, she's got the little what's her name, Rosie the Riveter kind of vibe going on. I was like, oh please, be still my beating heart.
Yeah, bro.
By Race Cheryl, do you mean Lana Del Rey? Because that's what we got. That's what we got. And I was just like, oh yeah, good. Everyone just brings the look. Everyone brings the look, except Archie in that jacket. Everyone has a look for every occasion. Archie and Jug are just they are what they are. But everyone else is serving.
Oh, Jughead has 4 jackets, bro. He rotates through them.
Yeah, I know, but how many pairs of pants does he have? And Pete, we're probably the same, so we can both answer less than 5. Less than 5 pairs of pants in rotation. More jackets than pants. Come on.
Yeah, no. My whole thought is definitely every time I see him, just this kid who's supposed to be lower, middle class or upper lower class, and it's man, you can sure afford a lot of expensive jackets.
Yeah, that's a nice all of those, even excluding the Serpent's jacket. I'm just where did you get these?
Is there a Burlington coat factory in Riverdale?
But the race sort of cemented my disdain for Archie into I think it's going to be really hard for me to get on board with Archie and going forward. I think there's something, if the CW is listening and they want me as a person specifically to like Archie, there's going to be a lot of things that need to be done, because it felt like he was by not telling Jughead any of this, it felt like he was sort of spitting in Jughead's face. I got very Tony Stark vibes from Archie.
But at the same time, Jughead didn't tell him about joining the Serpents until the last second, and I think it's going both ways. I think Archie's has more immediate implications, but I think it's going both ways.
I guess you're right. I'm probably more sympathetic to Jughead's position, especially because that's something that was sort of known that his dad did, and that's something that didn't really have an immediate effect on his friends, or really any at all, as immediate as this one, because Jughead sort of set this whole thing into motion, and for Archie, who is supposed to be his best friend, to have an ulterior plan, a secret plan going on the entire time, and not telling him about it, especially when that plan was with the cops, just feels sort of like a slap in the face.
It was, for me, the plan was very clever. Mm-hmm. It was a very clever way for them to win the race. Air quotes around that, win the race.
Yeah. Quote unquote, win the race.
Right. But, it felt very bullheaded and I know better than you when, Jughead knows the situation, and he knows how like fragile this thread he's walking is, and Archie has no idea.
Yeah, and I think like the point that he makes, right, where like Archie's kind of like, I took them off the chessboard, right? And it's like Jug's like, yeah, for like what, a month?
Yeah.
3 months?
Yeah.
And then they're back and we have to deal with this. And it's like, it's a Band-Aid that like ultimately is going to just make the wound fester and make this more of a problem for them. So after the race, Cheryl kind of heads home, right? And we get the final piece of the Sugar Man puzzle. Like her mother basically explains that it was kind of a story that she used to, she says, it was a story I concocted to turn an all too real monster into a child's boogeyman. And we learned that there's been multiple Sugar Men over the years, right? Who've like each kind of taken over for the last. And when Clifford was kind of grooming Jason to become his successor, it was him meeting the previous Sugar Man, or I guess the current one. That was kind of the thing that she said that was the first in a series of events that led to his death. And I thought that was interesting because I thought it was going to mean that there would be further implications for this in the episodes to come, but it doesn't necessarily seem that way. Just to throw this out there, right? Cheryl gives her mother the money, she burns it, right? And then we get back to Pops. Betty gets a call from Cheryl while she's with Veronica and, figures out who the Sugar Man is. And, we learn that, at the end of the episode that it was Jughead's teacher. The guy who was the guy who was supposed to be, the person keeping him out of trouble. He's working on the newspaper and everything. And we find out it was him the whole time. He ends up getting, I guess we'll talk about the phone call, right? So she hears from the Black Hood. And this is when Betty, takes the opportunity to turn the tables here. And, she's clearly coming into this conversation with a lot of confidence, right? Like, she is kind of playing with him. She's like, oh, I assume my time is up. And I feel like she was, directly channeling her mother in this conversation with just the whole, attitude that she takes at him, where she's like, I could tell you, but I've already notified the police, and you'll just have to read my expose in the blue and gold, And I was just like, yo! And she's like, oh, care to comment?
Dark Betty was channeled.
It's like, oh my god, slay, girl. and then it totally, he tries to intimidate her, right? He says that she's playing a risky game, and she's like, yeah, but it's my game now. And it ends with me catching you. I found out who killed Jason Blossom. I found out who the Sugar Man was. And you're next, Black Hood. I'm breathing down your neck. Can you feel it? Can you feel me? And I was like, oh my god, unleash the beast, dude.
This not to turn into Murphy, but it got a little sexual for me, and I was kind of into it.
It's just I'd let Betty Cooper stand on me is all I'm trying to say, right?
She could breathe down my neck if she wanted. That's all I'm saying.
Guys, this isn't the Long Box podcast. Come on.
Let's try to maintain some decency.
That's all I'm saying. That's all.
Yeah, I was so very, very scared during the phone call moments that we were just not going to find out who the Sugar Man was. I was literally at the edge of my seat.
Yeah, they teased that out for a while.
The last scene dragged on for what felt like 10 minutes. It was commercial break to end, kind of. And what do you guys think about the identity? Because for me, that came way out of left field, especially for this Sugar Man arc, not the existence of To Capture, not even being teased for, it wasn't even a whole episode.
Yeah, I thought that was weird too. I thought that this storyline seemed like it could have been something that was stretched out over the course of a few episodes and drip fed to us, but we went through the entire thing, right? We learned about the Sugar Man, we figured out his connection to Cheryl, we figured out who he was put in jail, and then he dies. And it's oh. And I feel there's going to be fallout from that,
yeah,
obviously.
Shit, he does die.
Yeah.
I was like, no, he doesn't die. Come on. No, he fucking dies.
Yeah, the end of the fucking episode is the fucking Hood just shoots him.
Yeah.
So it's
no, you're right.
My whole thing, I literally wrote in my notes, right? I was like, oh my god, the teacher was the Sugar Man? What does that even mean, dude? And it's I don't even know if it means anything now. He's fucking dead.
Yeah.
Is it just going to create a power vacuum? Like, are we going to figure out the connection he had to Jason's death? Like, I don't know. I would think so, but...
I don't really know that there was a connection to Jason's death other than he met the sugar daddy and he just didn't want to...
this stuff.
He didn't want to play ball. Yeah.
The sugar daddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was, like, initially I was like, the next episode, like, they need a new English teacher, but Southside High is so underfunded that I don't know if it'll ever come up.
Yeah, Jughead's the new English teacher. Fuck it.
All right, listen, guys, we're reading Kurt Vonnegut and we're watching Quentin Tarantino. I'm edgy.
I mean, hey,
I don't
sounds
know.
like a good day.
Jughead's the kind of guy who would make him watch the Rockford Files or one of those old grisly like noir sitcoms. In the 70s and 80s.
My new fanfic is Jughead excitedly making a group of kids at Southside High watch Nosferatu, and none of them want to see it, and he's so stoked.
Man, we're turning out fanfiction ideas left and right this episode. So yeah, I mean, the only other like fallout, there's a few little nods at things that I think are going to come up later this season. Jug is talking to Tony afterwards, and he's kind of trying to figure out where the serpents stand on where things fell out. And she said some people respect him for winning, and some people, don't like that they perceive that he cut a deal with Keller, because it like quote puts us in bed with pigs, and they don't know that Archie's responsible for that. They don't care. They see that as Jughead's move. So I'm sure that we haven't seen the last of the trouble with the Ghoulies and Jughead's increasingly, seeming to be leadership role in this organization. We'll see where that takes them. And then in regard to Archie, it seems like the big thing that I saw was that I got the impression it seems like maybe we're going to have a storyline with Fred having a trouble with drugs. He had the thing where he was holding those pills and Archie's like, oh, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, no, I'm feeling better every day. But it's like, he looked concerned. There was like a weird kind of tension there, and I feel like that's going to maybe be a thing that comes up.
Yeah, I got that vibe too.
I must have missed that. I didn't.
It was like super subtle.
Catch that at all.
Yeah, it was very, very subtle. But it was very similar to like the vibe I got between like Josie and Reggie earlier, where I was like, it's one of those like CW lookaways where it's like this thing happens and we linger on Archie for just long enough for him to look concerned, and I'm like, if he's concerned, I guess that's supposed to be the implication in my mind. So I don't know.
Interesting.
And then, so we get a little bit of our wish come true, right? The Lodges get a call, and the St. Clairs have had an unexpected car accident.
Oh my god!
Imagine that!
Oh no!
I'm so freaking shocked.
Wait, are you?
I hope they're okay.
Wait, are you guys being serious? They got into a car accident, guys.
Yeah, they did. I hope. Jeez.
I'm so concerned for them. So I wanted to ask, like, did you guys think, like, Hermione says Nick will recover, but it's going to take several months. Do you think that means his parents are dead?
Don't they say what happened to his parents?
Yeah,
I don't.
Wasn't it?
I thought she specifically said his parents blank, but Nick was pretty hurt. It's going to take a minute.
Yeah.
I don't quite remember.
I felt like the parents were fine. I mean, they had like 2 seconds of screen time, and it's not going to affect me much if they're dead. So,
yeah, no, I'm just wondering because I think like Nick's clearly alive, right? So is it like his parents are dead and he has a vendetta, or does he just have a vendetta because of the car accident? Like I don't know.
Do you think we're ever going to see him again?
Yeah, I think we will. I think if we weren't going to see him again, they would have killed him off here and now to show that Hiram means business.
Yeah.
Any character that you don't see die is, I think, always going to come back. I think Grundy proved that.
Fair.
The thing I wanted to ask you is, like, what did you guys think of Veronica's reaction? And she's like, oh, well, karma's a bitch. It's like, whoa.
I mean, I get it.
No, like, I agree, but, like, that's a big flip from earlier where she's like, oh, I don't want his blood on my hands. It's like, well, I mean...
Blood wasn't on her hands. I think that's specifically why Hermione stepped in and said, oh, we're not going to take that money, instead of letting Veronica hear whatever her Hiram was about to say, so that she would know and she wouldn't be implicated. Yeah, I totally agree.
This sort of, I think Hermione's I think Veronica is my favorite main cast character at this point. She's just been sort of, the little sort of like half eye open smile she gave when she's like, oh yeah, hell yeah.
We're all very, very pro Veronica. That's for sure.
So did you guys feel any differently about who the killer might be? Who's the hood?
No idea.
No, I really don't. Yeah, I don't feel like we're any closer to really having the answer in my mind. And I think, I know we only have like 1 or 2 episodes left before the season break, I think.
I don't think we do, actually.
It's actually further out than we thought?
I think it goes through till like March. I was looking at it as we were watching the show, yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, because I know we've been having some trouble nailing that down. I feel like that answer's coming. I think Betty's little speech is either going to lead to an answer about the hood or severe consequences in the death of another person or a death of somebody who's actually important or another serious attack.
Mark, who do you think it is? What's your big theory?
Honestly, I haven't, initially, like in the very beginning, I didn't have any kind of theory, but now that we know that it's someone, the one theory that I have is it could be, getting his name, it could be a scout.
Dilton? Oh, Dilton?
Dilton
Doily?
Because, so, he got hurt, right, in the fight, and we haven't seen a killing since he got hurt. Like, that was
we haven't seen a killing since before that, though.
But, that's just one of my, another thing, I don't know, and he's, weird and, off-kilter enough that I could see him having this weird obsession with Betty, but really, we know. I think it's probably someone who's older though.
Yeah, it has to be. I definitely am squarely of the opinion that it's a white dude in his 40s. They've said as much, and we've seen him.
The outline of his eyes.
Yeah,
and
yeah, dude. And he's kind of a bigger guy. He's kind of stocky.
Well, I could see if there is a copycat. I could see Dilton being a cop. I don't see him having the stomach to kill people, and I don't see him being removed from the show, and I think that obviously the Black Hood's going to be removed from the show.
In the comics, he is sort of has a thing for Betty.
Dilton?
So I can see him being the Black Hood who calls
the imposter.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah,
that'd be interesting.
I came up with a couple more fringe theories through this episode, but nothing that was really concrete. Like you said, there wasn't anything really that gave us any clues this episode.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting was I feel like I remember walking away from this episode really feeling like it was a breath of fresh air away from the Black Hood story, where it's we got progression there, but it was mostly focused on Betty's relationship to him, not really solving the mystery. And I feel like the focus was way more about the stuff going on with the serpents and the ghoulies. Really kind of finally exploring that story, which has been kind of bubbling under the surface for a while.
And that makes sense because I feel like the tension between the Black Hood and the the serpents and the ghoulies is really going to have a larger impact on Riverdale, the town, because
clearly, right? There's clearly a conflict to come. So I think before we head out, I just want to point out the most important thing that happened this episode, which is that Buckhead's back, baby. Reunited, and it feels so good.
Yeah, it's okay, I guess.
Yo, fuck you, Marco. you fucking tughead people. I don't believe in that.
Joni. I don't know.
No, Joni. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I'm here for that one. The Josie Tony chip
or Joe Paz.
Ooh, that's good. That's good. I like that one. Joe Paz.
Yeah. Jughead and Tony's relationship had to die so that her relationship with Josie's could blossom and that the best ship on television could get back together, Marco.
There you go.
So
they might be dethroned. I'm here for Josie and Tony, I tell you what.
Also, question. Sorry to backtrack. How did the Black Hood get to jail?
Huh.
It's a good question. I was wondering the same thing. Whoa. What if it's Sheriff Keller?
Whoa.
That'd be crazy.
I never thought about it right now, but he's literally the only other white man in his 40s.
And he, it's that sort of, it's that trope where he he's the only guy that has access to the files and comes back with something that is different,
Yeah, and who else, he is the chief of police, the sheriff, he is the protector of her.
You'd never ever suspect him. I don't know. I don't think it's him, but I don't think that's.
But it's a cool theory.
That's
it's a solid
cool
theory, though.
It's
Yeah.
gotta be.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it could be like a deputy, like or something. Like whoever it is has access to the jail, or the next episode's going to start with someone being like, Black Hood broke in and killed the Sugarman kind of thing.
Yeah. Unless there's some information that's already been withheld from us about how he got in.
Yeah.
That's definitely an interesting wrinkle in who the greater question of who is the Black Hood. But yeah, I mean, any closing thoughts on Chapter 19 before we bring it home?
I really wanted to see. I really wanted to see who was going to win that race. Like,
me too.
I kind of like, as clever as that twist was, I would have liked to have seen that race play out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really would have been cool.
Like if there were one moment in this whole series where it stuck to that 50s Archie feel, I wish it was that one.
Yeah, I agree. That would have been really cool. But I think it was, to your point, a clever subversion of that, which is what Riverdale's all about, right? So
yeah.
All right, so I think that's going to wrap it up here on this episode of the Riverdale Review. Remember, if you guys want to write in and have your thoughts about the episode heard on the air, you can send us an email at thecomicspals@gmail.com. You can also hit us up at thecomicspals wherever your social media is sold. Leave us a comment down below if you're on YouTube or SoundCloud. If you guys are on YouTube, we would really appreciate it if you guys would like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you guys are on SoundCloud, give us a like. If you're on iTunes, we'd greatly appreciate it if you guys could give us a rating. We're currently a 5-star rated podcast, something of which we're very proud, and we'd love to see those numbers go up because they really help the show. And last but not least, the best thing you can do is just share the show with your friends. If you're a fan of Riverdale, you've got other Riverdale fans in your life, let them know that this podcast is out there and that you enjoy it. So before we bounce, Mark, thank you again so much for joining us here on this episode.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime, buddy. So before we bounce out, just you want to let everybody know where they can find you on social media, anything you want to plug, anything like that?
I'm at Mark Bouchard on Twitter, and I'm currently working on an anthology called Everything Is Going Wrong, and it's a comic anthology about punk and mental illness. I'm editing it, and our submission just closed, so look out for that on my Twitter feed. I'll be plugging that a bunch as printing moves forward. Yeah.
Awesome.
Rad.
Yeah, we'll have to have you over on the Comics Pals to talk about that when that finally gets going.
Yeah, my co-editor is a Valkyrie. She'd love to come on with me.
Ooh, hell yeah. That'd be good.
Yeah.
That'd be a good episode. I'd love to talk to a Valkyrie.
Awesome.
I'd be all about
What
it.
is that?
Valkyrie is it's an organization started by Kate Leth of women who work in comic shops just all over the country.
Oh,
the
cool.
world, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that.
Yeah, they're great.
But that's a conversation for another podcast. So we will catch you guys next week on another episode of the Riverdale Review.
Hey, Pops, can I get a piece of pie?
Ooh, can I get the to-go box?
I'll take mine a la mode.
Vegan milkshake.
Oh, do they do that here? Do they do that here? Do they do that here? Do they do that here?